You've never heard of this amp, but if the words diesel, SLO 100, Bogner shell, Omega Granifier, if those words get you excited, then you need to know about this amp. Such a good amp. It's got this push-pull control on the front that it literally switches between the best, most sort of refined, massive rectifier sound with no fizz to this big, wide, mid-pushed Soldano SLO lead sound just by pulling the control out. It's called the Dualist XL and it's hand-wired here in the UK by a builder called RD Amplification. There's loads of technical spec and in-depth geeky amp stuff on their website, or if you message Rob, the owner of RD, directly, he'll be happy to talk about any of the more unusual options available. But for now, I'll run you through the specs of this one behind me, which I would say is the more normal kind of basic model. It's a single channel amp, but with the switch that I mentioned before, it's got two different voicings, and to be honest, I can't really decide which one is my favourite because it kind of changes every day. It has controls for bass, middle and treble and a master volume. It also has a filter control which really helps you dial out any fizz in your sound, no matter where it's coming from. If it's a pickup issue or speaker, you'll be able to dial it out. And this is especially useful when moving from different speakers and different cabs. For example, if you're using a venue's house cab or borrowing from another band at a gig to keep changeover times to a minimum, you should be able to make even the harshest speakers usable. It has two gain controls, hence the name Dualist. Gain 1 takes you from crunchy clean all the way to a bit beyond classic rock levels of gain. Then you bring in Gain 2 to take you into really saturated high gain for modern rock and metal. And then there's actually a gain trim control on the back, which is currently set to halfway, but it's insane to think that there's even more gain available if you really want. And then it also has a second push-pull, which is labelled bright. So maybe if you're using a guitar with darker sounding humbuckers, you can add a bit more life to them, or maybe to add a bit more sparkle to a clean sound. This particular one is EL34 powered and a very, very loud 30 watts, but you can choose the output stage that best suits your needs, 6L6 or 5881s with more or less power. It's completely up to you. And as you can see, this one is finished in a very eye-catching white Tolex, which I think overall looks very tasteful with that top-mounted chassis, but you should definitely get snakeskin. Or possibly neon yellow, but go for snakeskin. It has a valve buffered effects loop and onboard analog reverb. And the cool thing about the reverb is that it's rich and slightly darker sounding, which means that you can have the mix higher than you normally would on other amps without the reverb getting in the way of the notes that you're playing. It really does, it takes a lot for things to start getting messy. And it might be a single channel amp, but you could easily record an entire album with this thing. With the 2 different voicings and the amount of gain available, there's a huge amount of sounds hiding inside this amp. And I was playing around with double tracking with this amp, with the more sort of rectifier sound on one side and the Soldano-ish sound on the other side, or voice 1 and voice 2, or American and British, whatever. And it just sounded massive, it sounded huge. In the track that I did end up using, at the start of this video, I ended up going with voice 1 for the rhythms and the voice 2, the pulled out one for the leads, and they just complement each other really well. RD amps also make their very own high quality matching cabinets with your choice of speaker. They recommend trying this one out with their 1510, which is like a vertical cab that kind of looks like a 212, but it's actually a 15-inch speaker at the bottom and a 10-inch speaker above. I've tried it myself, and it's definitely something special. It gives you a much wider range of frequencies, and most notably, it's much more clearer and detailed in the low end. But they do also make more traditional style cabs as well, so any configuration pretty much is possible. But I don't have that cab here right now, unfortunately, so everything you hear is a blend of an SM57 in front of a 212 with Vintage 30s and a Celestian IR of their green backloaded cab. And it takes tube screamers really well. One of my favourite sounds for the more drop tune stuff was having both gain controls on about 11 o'clock, maybe just before, and then boosting the front end of the tube screamer, gain on 0 and volume maxed out. So these amps are hand built to order, are completely customizable, within reason, customizable, and a price to compete. The prices do change according to what options you choose, obviously. But if you were to say spec it out just like the amp that I'm using today, in the bigger head shell with reverb in whatever colour Tolex you want, snakeskin, that'll be about $19.99. Although they do start from around $18.50. And to really put that into perspective, Andertons are currently selling orange rocker verbs for $18.99. And not to single out orange, because I do really like orange, but you can also get a made in Mexico EVH for similar money. I know which one I'd go for. And if you were wondering, this is a Pioneer guitar from LT Custom Guitars. If you've never heard of them before, then I highly recommend you check out one of these two videos to find out more about these. I think you'll really like them.